I'm Edie Lush, and I'm here outside the Hub Culture Ice Pavilion in Davos. Delighted to be joined by repeat guest, Achim Steiner. Now, you gave me your card and you've moved possessions again. You're now the head of UNDP. Congratulations.
Thank you. No, since June last year, the Secretary General has asked me to lead the United Nations Development Programme, and so from now on, I'm operating out of New York.
So, we are the last generation that can solve climate change. We're the first generation that can get rid of extreme poverty, and we're the first generation to be walking around with a computer in our pocket. Tell me how mobile technology affects what you do in development.
First of all, it has already begun changing the present. So what we see across the world, and it is not just in Silicon Valley or in some of the technology centers that we traditionally associate with these technology opportunities, but across Africa, across Asia, Latin America, people are using these technology platforms to change the way development happens, whether it's money transfers, whether it's data access, whether it's identifying priority areas. We can use Google Street View today to almost achieve the same level of information quality as a census in order to identify socioeconomic profiles of poorer people. These shortcuts are one opportunity. The other one is obviously disruption. Technology is increasingly beginning to change the way our economies work, where work will happen and therefore employment will be available. So a big debate is Africa, the year 2050, 2 billion African citizens. What will be the future of an African economy? Maybe growing at 5%, but zero job growth. So those are some of the issues that I think come as part of the technology package that is shaping the way our societies and economies work.
Tell me how you at UNDP are thinking about that. Give me an example of where something is working really well.
I think first of all it is in connectivity and access and inclusiveness. These are three terms that may sound abstract, but first of all, inclusiveness means you make, for instance, the financial system more accessible to people if they can use smartphones in order to do financial transactions. 10 years ago, unheard of, considered impossible, the privilege of the few. Today, it's actually the shortcut for the poor. Secondly, access. When we talk about energy access, we are looking at new platforms on which not only renewable energy, which can operate off-grid, can work, but also how energy systems can connect rural economies. We must understand that half of the world's population still live in the rural areas of the world, and with 3 billion more people, we must not only look at the urban industrialization pathway to development, but also what will happen to the 4 billion people that will live in rural areas that need to be connected to the global economy. And data becomes for them vital. If you can connect a rural market town to a global marketplace in terms of services through the digital economy, that's a great opportunity. So these are examples where we are working right now and today. And even in our own organization, I have learned just last week that we are developing new apps in Mali on how to operate in a security challenge context where applications and using the digital platforms become a way of doing business.
Now there's an area where development isn't doing so well, and we have a lot of places that are very poor where we're also seeing violent extremism. Tell me about the intersection of that and how that challenges your work.
Well, sadly, our age is characterized by an increase in violent extremism, and it is in many different contexts that we observe this, but one key factor clearly is people are alienated. They view themselves as marginalized. They are therefore more likely to be susceptible to those who come and provide them with an alternative vision, which can be something that engages in the community, or it can be violence and a rebellion against community, against governments, against the state. So in short, a development failure in part also explains radicalization, and so the prevention of violent extremism takes us back to saying, where do we need to invest in development? It's not always in the cost-benefit analysis that the answer lies. Sometimes it's the marginal areas in a country, in an economy. It's the border areas where people have been left behind. The state is very absent. Education, health infrastructure are not really accessible. So if somebody comes, gives you money, offers you an alternative vision and gives you a gun and says, go and fight the system, sadly that's where we have seen a great deal of radicalization happen. And UNDP published last year a remarkable report, Journeys to Extremism, by interviewing 800 former combatants and asking them, how do you move from being the 16-year-old pride of your family to being a terrorist in your community? And it has some very revealing findings in there that will also guide us in our development work to not see the prevention of violent extremism as a military and security response, but rather as a much more effective way in creating conditions that will avoid people being tempted into these pathways.
So I read that report, and one of the things that really struck me was the lack of a father figure in many of these, with many of these people. They had challenging situations at home. But how can UNDP, how can a development organization affect such a critical and micro level issue as the lack of a leader in the home?
Well, look, whether it is the United Nations Development Programme or Oxfam or others, we can never replace the people of a country in terms of driving the development. We are advisors. We can help them catalyze things that may otherwise not be possible today. We can provide some initial financing, but what we can help, particularly where the UN's development program is engaged in 170 countries, is to give governments access to best practice, to the kinds of policies that will allow them to reach these communities. So it's not, in a sense, us doing the work that is part of the national development process. But that report that you refer to also holds some very bitter lessons. For instance, 70% of the respondents, these young men and women, when asked what was the trigger for you to join these radical movements, was actually state and government action. So the very action that is meant to combat extremism and becomes a security military intervention often turns out to have collateral damage. You know, your father is arrested, your brother is shot, or maybe a member of the family is raped, and young people, yes, they're looking for leadership, for vision, but they're also looking for an opportunity to have a fair and opportunity-oriented society. And if they don't find that, they will turn to other answers.
Achim, thank you very much for stopping by
It's
the
a
Hub
pleasure.
Culture Ice House, and I'm Edie Lush.